engines!
Hit the pace car! What for? Because you hit every other damn thing out there. I want you to be perfect.
When I'm driving, I got a guy on the radio who talks to me. It's him. He talks to me.
Well, I wanna be a race car driver. Pretty girls eating from my hand, yeah. Wanna live a life of fun and danger. No sweating working for the man, alright. Well, I wanna be a firefighter. Cool headed when the heat is on, yeah. Save a baby from the burning building. Take her home and put the sprinklers on, alright.
No, he didn't slam you, he didn't bump you, he didn't nudge you, he rubbed you. And rubbing, son, is racing.
Hey, race fans, welcome to the Hoobazoo Radio Network, and welcome to the Drafting the Circuits program. My name is Frank Santoroski. I'll be your host for the next hour as we go over everything racing. Joining me in the studio today are Mr. Gray Warren, Mr. Richard Youden, and Mr. Seth Eggert. Fellas, how we doing tonight?
Doing good.
Doing great.
Very good, thank you.
All right, so as Independence Day is looming in the near future for us, we had a good weekend of racing this weekend. We had Formula One. It was in Austria. The NASCAR boys were at Chicagoland in Joliet. The winners were Max Verstappen, a non-Mercedes winner for the first time this year, and Alex Bowman took his first career win in the Cup car. So let's start with the Formula One race. Now, Richard, last week we were talking about how terribly boring the race was and what we need to do to fix Formula One, and when is this single team domination going to end, and then what a difference a week makes. My gosh, this was an exciting race to watch.
I don't think that at the time had anything to do with it. I think the fact they went back to a proper racetrack had something else to do with it.
Certainly that has something to do with it, yeah. And then, Mercedes had some overheating issues as well. But, I mean, we saw a really good race with a proper pass for the lead on the track and the closing stages. So let me let you just take us through the highlights and details real quick, and then we'll get into the delay and the decision on the final result.
Yeah. So Austria's I think one of the short, if outside of Monaco, probably the shortest track on the calendar, and but it's far faster than Monaco. So it's a 70-lap race. So it's quite an action-packed, intense race around a small track there. It's an old-fashioned style circuit. Very hilly, lots of gradients there, real runoff, gravel, walls, not this zebra print stuff you had at Paul Ricard. And, it just proves what these old-fashioned circuits are like. They make for great racing, and we certainly saw that this weekend. The Ferraris were fast all weekend. As you'd probably expect, it's a very similar circuit to Canada. Lots of, high-speed straights and then relatively aggressive braking zones, and of course Vettel arguably should have won Canada. So you expected the Ferraris to be on pace there, and they certainly were. And Charles Leclerc just again this season, for another time this season, seemed to have the upper hand on Seb there this whole weekend, and got the pole there. And Vettel had a mechanical issue in Q3 which relegated him, I think it's a 9th on the grid. Hamilton qualified second, but then had a 3-place penalty for impeding Raikkonen in Q1. So that put him back to 4th on the grid after I think Magnussen had a penalty as well. So you had I think it was the youngest front row ever in Formula One with Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen taking up the grid, both 21 years of age, both born within 10 days of each other or something crazy like that. And Leclerc got a fantastic start, led away from the line. Verstappen had a shocking start, and anti-stall kicked in, and he dropped back to, I think, about 7th or 8th by the end of the first lap. But he managed his tyres well in the early stages, ran longer than everybody else by about 10 laps, and then when everybody made the stops, he had fresher tyres than everybody else and really pushed and started to sort of haul in the leaders. Managed to get past Bottas there to take second, and then with about 15 laps to go, you suddenly like, well, hang on, he could win this now. And he'd saved his tyres throughout the race, and he just had about 3 to 4 tenths of a second a lap on on Leclerc there and just reeled him in and made, I think, a good pass, to take the lead.
Let's talk about the pass a little bit because it was
forceful.
It
was aggressive. But, I mean, you go back, 15 years to the Schumacher era, and that was a classic Schumacher pass. There was nothing in there that was particularly excessive. Leclerc had plenty of room. The only comment that I think I made, and I discussed with you guys, while it was happening live, if you watch Verstappen, he didn't take his normal line through that corner. He missed the apex by a good few feet there, which enabled him to force Leclerc wide, which was a little bit, maybe, I don't know. But personally, I didn't have too much of an issue with it. I thought it was a good move and a strong move, an aggressive move. And obviously, Leclerc is going to be frustrated and is going to be shouting on the radio.
Right, but let me ask you this, Richard. Okay, to me the pass looked like a good old-fashioned racing pass. He stuck his nose in there, ran the guy a little wide, claimed the corner. This is what we're used to in American racing. That's not a penalty. That's good hard racing.
Yes, exactly.
The cars touched wheels very briefly. The cars were not damaged. Nobody was hurt. Nobody got hurt. That would never be a penalty in American racing. Now in Formula One, we saw what happened in Canada with where Lewis and Sebastian didn't even touch. He just forced kind of Lewis to go offline a little bit, and then that was a penalty for Vettel. So,
I think
that sets up the case that everybody's saying, well, for consistency's sake, if you penalized Vettel, you need to penalize Verstappen.
Yeah.
That's
I know what
popular
you're saying.
Logic. Yeah. I'm not saying it's right. So, but you tell me what the difference between the two moves
So
were.
Vettel got penalised for re-entering the track in a dangerous way, or whatever the terminology was. Vettel didn't get a penalty for driving Hamilton off the track because he didn't. Hamilton stayed on track. What Vettel got the penalty for was re-entering the track dangerously, which it's a very fine line, but he probably did. Now, the nature of what he was, the nature of racing is you're always going to do that. There was nothing, Vettel didn't have a choice. He had to do what he did. So I don't think there's a criticism there of Vettel. But what Verstappen did was just hard racing, as you say. There was there's no malice in there. There was no intent to drive him off the track. There's no intent to endanger a competitor's life. So I really think he was well within his right, for want of a better word, to make that move. I certainly didn't see an issue with it.
He was certainly faster than Charles. He had. Charles was a sitting duck at the end. Vettel had, or not Vettel. Max had a lot more. Go ahead.
I think Ferrari had probably written Verstappen out of the race after that bad start and dropping back. They're like, we'll keep an eye on him, but he's out of the race. In reality, in terms of being a threat to Leclerc. And, he saved his tyres and he conserved them and he kept fresh rubber down there. And then when it got to the business end of the race, he turned them on fantastically. So huge amount of credit needs to go to Verstappen. He drove a fantastic race there. And it was a fantastic move for the win.
Right, and it was great for the fans, too.
Start.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's his fan base right there. There are hundreds of thousands of Verstappen fans in Austria, so pretty neat. Now, Seth,
and Red Bull fans, so yeah.
And Red Bull fans, absolutely. So Seth, you have a question, so I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go right ahead.
Oh, you're fine. Speaking of the bad start, I want to bring this up. Kevin Magnussen in the Haas car was penalized 25 seconds for being just over the line for the box on the grid.
Yeah, start grid, yeah.
While the FIA was deliberating on the contact between Charles and Max, there were also photos circulating around that Max was out of position as well.
Yep.
But Max was never penalized for that, so wouldn't that also show inconsistency at the same time? Because
it shows maybe a lack of transparency from the FIA standpoint. So what each car will have is it has an electronic transponder on the car. And then under each grid slot, there is a sensor, for want of a better word, which detects when the car's in place. So the penalty handouts probably go on that sensor readout far more than actual visual aid. So it could be, I mean, we could be talking millimeters here, which is impossible to detect with the naked eye from TV footage.
I understand what you're saying. The one thing I will say, because there was a side-by-side photo of Magnussen's car with Max's car, as far as how far further in the box they were. For Magnussen, you could still see the painted white line for the box.
Yes.
For Max, you couldn't see the line at all.
No.
So, Richard, are those transponders in the same place on every car?
They should be. Well, they'll do a relative difference of position. So wherever the car sits, it'll measure the difference from, So yeah, there could be some vagaries within each pit installation. I don't know enough about how all that works, the finer details of it. But we're probably talking millimeters here, and it's a very, very unfortunate thing, for want of a better word.
It seems like 25 seconds is a rather harsh penalty for just something that didn't really gain him anything other than millimeters, maybe. I mean, the guy, he's already penalized by having to drive a Haas car.
Exactly.
So why make the guy's day worse?
He also had a 5-place grid penalty as well, so he was already starting further back than he qualified. I think he had qualified 4th, and he ended up starting 9th after the penalty. Yep. So on top of that, the 25 seconds dropped him. My guess would be at least 5 to 6 spots in the finish order. Granted, he finished 19th, so 5 to 6 spots, he still wouldn't have gotten any points.
Make any difference,
But if it had been a less harsh penalty, maybe he would have at least been in the mix for 10th or so.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to have, obviously, like with anything, you've got to have rules and you've got to have limitations. And I think 25 seconds is harsh. I think a 5-second time penalty is appropriate. When you compare that to what happened to Vettel in Canada, you could argue that, the phrase is in the penalty. Vettel was penalised for re-entering the track dangerously. There's nothing dangerous about starting an inch further forward.
And forcing a competitor offline, not off track, offline.
Yeah. So
exactly. I just fail to see the how much gain you get from being a little bit out of your position at the start. You certainly.
And these are things
it's
that,
certainly not 25 seconds worth.
I agree. And these are probably things that hopefully Liberty Media and Formula One will be able to sit down, and I'm sure Haas will be protesting it, or at least raising a similar point to what we've got going on, saying, hey, look, guys, is this really fair? And hopefully they'll all sit down and say, okay, well, look, we need to come up with a more suitable penalty, system here, because that was a little bit excessive. So we can hope that they do improve that going forward. Yeah.
One more question I do have, or comment I want to make anyway. Robert Kubica getting driver today. What?
Yeah, I think somebody hacked that, didn't they? I just want to make a couple of quick comments, actually, talking about Kubica. A couple of guys that I think are struggling so far this season. Unfortunately, I put Kubica in that league. I think George Russell has, beaten him in every race. I know he's out-qualified him in pretty much every race.
Every race, yep.
So I think Kubica could be the spot of bother for keeping his drive for next year. But one person that I think is in real danger, and it could be even mid-season break, is Pierre Gasly. He's just not at the races. I mean, both in not Manicourt. Jeez. Paul Ricard and the A1 ring, or Red Bull ring, or whatever we can call it these days. He was level with Verstappen on lap 1, and then by the end of the race had been lapped. That ain't good. That's Red Bull, they're pretty cutthroat, and
particularly when your teammate's out there winning the race and you're going backwards, and it just doesn't look good.
Who would they replace him with, though? Would they bring Kvyat back up, or?
I mean, I think in all
he's
fairness,
right there.
He's earned it. He has deserved. You can criticize Kvyat as much as you like, because he was pretty crash prone in his previous iterations of driving for Red Bull. But, the guy's turned around and he's gone away, worked on his issues, spent some time working with Ferrari as their simulator driver. And he's done his dues. And he's come back, much to people's surprise, but he's doing the business. Alex Albon's doing a good job as well in that car. And he's probably too young for him to step up. But I think you could very, very well see, a scenario similar to what we saw, in the past where, they do the old switcheroo, as it were, and bring, Kvyat back and drop Gasly back into the Toro Rosso. And then eventually
I could certainly see that
fades
happening.
off into endurance racing or something. Because the guy, we're not talking finishing 10 seconds behind your teammate here. We're talking a minute and a half, which I don't think there's a bigger differential between teammates as there is those two. It's pretty bad, in all fairness to the guy. And I hate, I don't want to bash these guys because they're still, even if they are a minute and a half slower than Verstappen over the course of a race, still pretty damn good. But you're driving for Red Bull Racing here. You're not, it's not a charity. They're not going to employ somebody just because they want to. They're going to employ people because they can compete and they can win. And at the moment, the guy just ain't getting it done.
No,
It was also Honda's first win in F1 in how long? Like 20 years?
2006.
2006.
2006 with the Braun team.
With,
Yeah, I was going to mention that.
Years.
I was going to mention that. This
that
answers
was
the question.
That was the Honda team.
Yes.
That wasn't fun. That was Honda.
Braun was the 2009, right?
Yeah. So 2006 Hungarian Grand Prix when Button qualified 16th and went on to win the race. And I was working for them at the time and I got a nice little bonus for that one.
Well, nice. So, but it does answer the question: can Honda win in Formula One again? So here they are. Here they are in the winner's circle. Red Bull doesn't look so foolish now for picking them up.
There'll be some fun conversations at the old McLaren headquarters, won't there?
McLaren can't seem to set a foot right.
Well, yeah,
not this
you see
season.
that. The last two races,
They haven't been terrible. No.
Lando Norris is. You're talking about people that are struggling. Gasly and Kubica there. Hey, you've got to take your hand off to Norris. He dragged that car around Paul Ricard at the end of the race there, and he was competitive again in Austria and had a good solid points finish. So he's, if you're looking at the future post-Hamilton of British Formula One racing drivers, to look at Norris and George Russell, you're pretty enthusiastic about it, I think.
Oh, for sure, yeah. Both those guys have a lot of talent. So then the other thing I wanted to mention was, we were talking about the Honda and the guys that may be on the way out, but there's a rumor floating that Nico Hülkenberg may be out of Renault in favor of spearheading Porsche's Formula E team. I think that's maybe not this season, but some reports seem to suggest it might be sooner rather than later. Although Hülkenberg is insisting that he feels safe in his Renault seat. What are you hearing on that one, Richard?
So Cyril Bunton, I can never pronounce it.
I can never say his name either. Yeah.
Cyril, there we go. He actually did give an interesting interview saying, well, we like Nico, but, we always have to, as a professional racing organisation, we have to keep our options open. Which, as anybody in racing, you're like, uh-oh, that's not a good thing to hear. Hulkenberg's one of those enigmas, isn't he? I think is the best way to describe the guy. Everybody raves about him. Everybody says he's this fantastic driver who's just never had the break. And one of the things I look at, and one of the sort of my thoughts behind this is, the guys like Mercedes and Ferrari and Red Bull and guys like that, they know the ins and outs of every driver far better than we do. And there's a reason Hülkenberg hasn't been picked up by one of those teams. And I'm not saying he's a bad driver. I just think he's a solid driver. And probably that's about it. Again, no disrespect to the guy, far better than us mere mortals, but probably just not quite cutthroat enough for the top end of Formula One. You know, you could potentially argue in the same way that maybe Valtteri Bottas is. You know, as much as I'd love to see him win a championship and push Hamilton, it's just that he's just lacking that tenth or two at certain times when he's not on his game. You just wish there was a little bit more from him.
Yeah, if he wasn't in a Mercedes, he would be rarely talked about.
Yeah.
You know, honestly.
Yeah.
So, and Bottas, he took the third spot at Austria, correct?
Correct, yeah.
And then Hamilton was in
fourth. So Hamilton had a crack.
I thought Hamilton was fifth.
Fifth, sorry.
Fourth or fifth. But when's the last time Hamilton was off the podium?
Oh.
It's been a minute, huh?
I think when he was in diapers, I think.
Well, the one race they took one another out.
Yeah,
that 2 years ago.
Yeah, there's been a few. Maybe Mexico last year. I think he wasn't on the podium there, possibly. Don't know. But yeah, it's obviously been a long time for them. You know, they've been so dominant. But I think I think he probably would have got third. I think he may have just sneaked Bottas there on the pit stop cycles, but he had a cracked wing, front wing. And that meant that they had to change the wing at the pit stop, so that cost him a 12-second pit stop, which put him out of sequence there, and he never really regained it. And then Vettel, towards the end of the race, went for a set of super or soft tyres there to try and get the fastest lap, which I think Verstappen even beat him to the fastest lap, even though he was on like 20-lap old tyres, which was quite impressive. You know, Max is on it that last sector, or the last stint of the race. So Hamilton finished down there in fifth, and a lot of the guys were running over these big sausage curbs or whatever they want to call them. And, you know, geez, they were damaging the cars, which is great to see. You know, you saw in practice, both Verstappen and Bottas have big accidents and hit the wall relatively hard. And Vettel came dangerously close to hitting the wall as well. And it was great to see. You know, the end of the day, these drivers, you know, quite rightly so, are pitched as the best drivers in the world. And they were making mistakes. How great is that to see? It's brilliant.
I mean, and it shows too that we've got, you know, a proper racetrack too, not something that's all flat with the what do you call the zebra striping?
Well, it looked like a TV test screen, didn't it? You know, from the 80s or whatever.
Oh,
it was horrible.
The French circuit, yeah, it looks like a spirograph. It makes me dizzy to watch a race there. And then, of course, you get to Coda, and it's all painted up in red, white, and blue, and it's just, you know, it looks like a carnival. I don't know, but So, how do you feel the rest of the season going to play out? Is this our one-off extra non-Mercedes win, or do you think that Red Bull and Ferrari can really challenge? Because the Ferraris look really good too.
The Ferraris did. I think if Vettel had been up there at the start of the race as well, you know, they would have given themselves a little bit of extra padding, for want of a better word, and support. Obviously, I don't know what the technical issue for Vettel was there, but it certainly hampered his Q3 and put him back down in ninth. But I think we go to Silverstone next, which that'll be an interesting race because that's a combination of you've got three, you've probably got four, maybe five, you know, top gear, you know, high, you know, fast straights there. But then you've also got like the Magnussen-Beckett complex where you've got, you know, very aero dependent. So it's going to be close there between Ferrari and Mercedes. I don't think Red Bull will be quite there, but they'll be close. So it wouldn't surprise me if Leclerc doesn't go out and win the British Grand Prix there. And I'm going to make my pick a week early.
Okay, so you're taking Leclerc for the British Grand Prix, but we've got a week off in between, correct?
Yes, there's no race this weekend, and they race back there on the 14th of July.
Yeah, the 14th, right. That's that 14th. That's going to be a good weekend. We've got NASCAR in Kentucky, the IndyCars in Toronto, and then Formula One British Grand Prix. That's going to be a great weekend there. All those races going on. So, Formula 2, Pato O'Ward made his debut. He was 17th or 18th.
He was languishing, I think, is the correct term for his result. I mean,
did you feel like he was in a bit over his head? I mean, he's not driven a car that powerful before. Those are, he's driven the Indy car, but I think the Formula...
They're probably up there.
They're probably close, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how much notice he had that he was going to be driving one of those things, but I can't imagine it was particularly long. So, you know, I think you take his results there with there should be a little asterisk next to those. it was like
he's a substitute driver, dropped in on short notice.
Thrown in the deep end on that one.
But I'm sure it was a good learning experience for him. And now his next gig, he's off to Japan to race the Formula Supercar.
So he's replacing Dan Tickton, who has been dropped from the Red Bull Junior program, who was put it bluntly, a whiny little bitch.
That's not very blunt.
Well,
Hey, you gotta call it like you see it, so.
Well, he last year when Mick Schumacher beat him to the championship, he was claiming that Schumacher was cheating and all this sort of stuff. And I think that was a bit of a warning shot across he got a bit of a warning shot across the bows on that one from the Red Bull hierarchy. And then at a previous round in the Formula Super Series or Super Formula Series, whatever they call it, I think he finished last, and he was saying, "Oh, there's something wrong with my car," and all this sort of stuff. And it's like, yeah, you done. So the harsh world of the Red Bull Junior Series took another victim there. But Ticktum's fast, but just he's got a bit of an attitude problem from what I gather. He actually had a 2-year ban from racing for under a safety car at Silverstone in Formula Ford, overtaking half the field to crash into a rival deliberately whilst under the safety car. So that got him a 2-year ban. So
and somebody hired him back after that. Go figure.
Well, yeah. I mean, the kids. He actually stayed on the Red Bull Junior program even after that. So, but Award's got that opportunity. I don't know what his Carlin commitments will be like.
My understanding is that there's no more funding to keep him in the Carlin car.
Okay.
I mean, they put him in the car at the last race there, simply because I think they just didn't have anybody else that brought any funding to the team. So I don't know if we'll see Pato back in a Carlin car this year. I mean, this could open the door for a few more starts for Connor Daly, who's taken over the ovals for Max Chilton. He could get a couple of those road course starts. They could possibly keep Charlie Kimball in the car. He splits that ride with Charlie Kimball, Pato's seat there. So if Charlie's sponsors want to kick in a few more bucks, we could see Charlie. Or it may open the door for R.C. Enerson, who's got some funding. And Enerson did some preseason testing with the team. The kid's pretty good. I'd like to see him in an Indy car in a couple of races. I think he'll do well with it. So we'll just have to see how all that plays out. And then the other possibility is that Carlin just runs the one car on those weekends. So the other thing about international racing I want to mention is I read an interesting story about the British Formula 4 series. And speaking of Carlin, this young kid named Zane Maloney has set a British Formula 4 season or series record with 7 consecutive wins. And that's just pretty cool. That's Lewis Hamilton kind of stuff there, right? I don't think even Hamilton's got 7 in a row. But probably not. Yeah. So anyway, the only reason I bring this up is the name Zane Maloney just jumped out to me because
he's not British. He's from Barbados.
Who? Zane Maloney?
Yeah.
Well,
he races under
the British Formula 4 series.
Yes.
Right. He was British. Yeah. No,
under the Barbados flag. Yeah.
Right. So anyway, we just. It just so happens my mother's maiden name is Maloney and our family race team is Maloney Racing, so we're gonna claim him as one of ours if he keeps winning like this. We just like to see that Zane Maloney 7 wins in a row. So I figure even though we've never been to Barbados, we must be related to this guy somehow.
Exactly.
So all right, so we're off next weekend and then we're on to Silverstone.
Correct,
Indy cars are off next weekend again as well, and then we are on to the Grand Prix of Toronto, which will be a fun race to watch. I always like that one. And NASCAR, we had all 3 series in action at Chicagoland. We had some serious rain that delayed the start. We ended up getting a Sunday night race, which was pretty cool, with a very, very muddy infield. As a matter of fact, I think our race winner, Alex Bowman, got stuck in the mud after he won the race. So, Gray, you want to take us through some of the highlights of Chicago?
Well, in the Cup race, like I said, the rain came, and after a start and a brief few laps, the cars were called to pit road and had to wait out a lengthy rain delay, some 3+ hours, and they finally got it started around, around 6 p.m. Eastern. And, of course, Chicago's good because they have lights there, and the race did finish partly under the lights. But Alex Bowman gets his first win in the Cup Series. He's been close, leads the series this year in second place finishes, and had a string of 3 in a row back a few weeks ago. But, he had a spirited duel with Kyle Larson there over the last 10 laps and was able to he got past and was able to regroup and get back around Larson and with about 3 or 4 to go and end up winning the race. So good for Bowman. You know, we've been thinking that he would probably pick up that first win at some point after his strong runs early this season. So he finally got it, but good competitive race. It was an up and down day for some guys. I believe Kevin Harvick had the strongest car and during points of the race, and he got in a little bit of trouble, got into the wall and damaged his car, and I think he never was able to recover from that. Kyle, what a day for Kyle Busch. I mean, he struggled with his car all day long. He had some issues, got in the wall a couple of times, recovered, got his lap back, got up racing up in the top 10 and had more trouble. And then late in the race, he was running in the top 10 and got in a little skirmish with Joey Logano and cut a tire down, had to go to pit road, lost a lap, and I think he finished somewhere 22nd or something like that. But some good runs for a lot of guys. It was a competitive race. I think
we had there was a pit lane penalty with Denny Hamlin. Hamlin having won the first stage. There was an uncontrolled tire. There were some folks that kind of disagreed with that call. I mean, I watched the video. It seemed to me anyway, that the tire was clearly out of the pit box and not within reach. But what are your guys' thoughts on that?
The rule states that it has to be in the pit box and it has to be within a arm's length of a crew member the entire time, along with the fact that it can't be thrown or simply just rolled to the wall. It has to be in some sort of contact at almost constantly with a crew member. And this is something that's been going on the past almost year and a half now. It's something that the drivers and some of the teams are just pushing back against NASCAR, trying to get away with it at times. To be fair, back at Iowa, a couple of teams got away with it, same with Gateway, because NASCAR didn't send the pro trailer, the pit road officiating trailer, to Iowa or to Gateway the past 2 weeks. Granted, those were for Truck and Xfinity races only.
Right. Now, correct me if I'm wrong on this, Gray. There was a time where NASCAR had one official in every pit box, right? They no longer have that now, correct?
That is correct. They used to have one in every pit box, and then it went to one official covering 2 at one time.
I believe it's currently one official covering 2, if not 3 now.
Yeah.
So they're going to miss some of those.
Well, I tell you, it's like everything else. NASCAR's a bottom as a company, and they look at their bottom line too. And one of the things that like most companies do is their labor costs, and they cut back on officials. I know there was some guys were having to do double duty when the Xfinity cars and the Cup cars would have a same weekend, where they were both there. The guys were splitting time between the garages, running back and forth and doing inspections. So they've cut back a lot of officials more so than what they had 10 years ago. And
yeah, I think there's more cameras everywhere too. So there's a lot of stuff you can look at on instant replay.
Some of it because of technology, for sure. But yeah, they've cut back. They've cut back on the number of officials at the track totally altogether.
Now, there have been some calls that have been questionable, whether or not it was truly over an arm's length away or say, somebody falling out over the wall or touching the ground with their hand to stabilize themselves, which it's something that some people think is nitpicky, but overall, it's more NASCAR trying to essentially enforce safety rules because of things that have happened in the past and that could happen in theory. I remember a race at Atlanta, I want to say it was about 10, almost 15 years ago now, in which a tire rolled out into the infield and a crew member had the bright idea of running across pit road to get it, forcing caution. And this was in the middle of a round of green flag pit stops. And essentially, it was Rudiman's team. It essentially altered the entire course of the race. With Atlanta being in the playoffs, it also altered the entire course of the playoffs. If I remember correctly, Tony Stewart went on to win that race, and that was one of the races that helped him. No way, I'm thinking 2011 on that one. But still, it's something that can alter a championship.
Certainly,
in the long run.
But the long and short of it is, like, I felt like, according to the letter of the rule, that it was a good penalty on Hamilton. I think that's
agreed.
Exactly, but I just don't understand why there's all this pushback that they're saying, oh, that's a bunch of BS and this and that. I'm like, the tire was clearly, one guy rolled it to the other guy out of the box.
For Hamlin's penalty, the tire was stationary. It was just that there wasn't, it wasn't in danger of rolling away. It was just that there wasn't somebody within an arm's length. There was
someone was not in contact with the tire. Yeah,
it was also outside the pit box. It was in the next pit box.
Unless I watched the wrong video, it rolled from it rolled in front of the pit box to the guy on the wall, and the guy on the wall grabbed it. It was rolled from one guy to the other. I don't know.
Yeah. Well,
Either way. So let's talk about Kyle Larson. Let's talk about Kyle Larson for a second. Poor guy seems to be snake bit. Can't seem to buy a win this day and age with a lot of really good finishes. He looked extremely disappointed at the end of the day, huh, Seth?
Well, he did have McDonald's as a sponsor, which they haven't won since, Jimmy Spencer in the 90s.
Didn't Bill Elliott win a couple races with him?
No, Bill Elliott won some dual races and I think a Bud Shootout with McDonald's, but they haven't won a points-paying race.
Since Jimmy Stewart at Talladega, huh?
Nope. McMurray never won with McDonald's on the car as a prime.
All right.
Okay, well, there you go.
So maybe that's a little bit of a jinx. I don't know. Overall, Kyle Larson has been running better. Chevrolet as a whole ran better. At one point, the entire top 7 was Chevrolet. Jimmy Johnson led 10 laps early, but he never fell outside the top 5 throughout the entire race. And the last time he did that was Bristol in the spring race last year.
Right. Matter of fact, Jimmy finished 4th, which was a really good run for Jimmy considering the couple of seasons they've had.
William Byron also had a good run, leading some laps, finishing inside the top 10. Chase Elliott, after the rain delay, they made wholesale changes to the car on the front end. He had dropped back to almost 30 when the caution came out for the rain, and he drove up to the lead, took the lead, and was battling with Harvick and Bowman and Larson at times.
Yeah, no, Austin Dillon won the pole and had a decent run there. He finished. I think he finished in the top 10, got a 10th place finish. So he runs somewhat better. They've stepped up their mile and a half program at RCR this year. They've been qualifying good. They just haven't been able to put that and parlay it into to a strong race run yet.
Now, I just want to mention the storm in general real quick. It actually did cause a little bit of damage to the scoring pylon, to several pit boxes, especially the NASCAR ends in one of the Rick Ware boxes. It blew the cover off of Bubba Wallace's car, and there was some misleading and false reporting that the electronics had been damaged by the rain. They had a second cover on it, clear cellophane, which, since it was clear, I can understand why people thought that the water got inside the car. Some cars actually got pushed together. The 41 and I believe the 88 were actually pushed together that they had to move the 88 and the 41 to be able to take the cover off of the one. And the 32 was actually pushed into the grass because of the wind. So
wow.
It was the rain was really coming down for a while. Yeah, it was bad what I saw on television. So now, Richard or Gray, are there a lot of sensitive electronics there in the car that are susceptible to rain? Because I know sometimes we've seen the Xfinity guys actually race in the rain. So I mean,
Yeah, they shouldn't be.
I was thinking, yeah.
Everything should be sealed. All the connectors they use and all the wiring harnesses they use, they're all made to sort of aircraft military standard.
Yeah.
So
that's kind of what I thought. So these were just erroneous reports anyway that turned out to be
and most of those cars, they put rain caps on them too. What Seth was referring to, the clear cover is called a rain cap, and sometimes they'll put it because those car covers are kind of porous and they will seep water through them. So some of them use a rain cap to put it over the greenhouse of the race car, and then if they know a good amount of rain's coming, they'll do that too. So it just keeps stuff out of the car, because you got to remember when that water gets in there and that car heats up, I mean it's like steam in there. So it's you want to try to keep it as dry as you can.
Good point. So now, Seth, I know you have some numerology thing about Alex Bowman here, but really quick. The last first-time winner was it? Is it Erik Jones or was it Chase Elliott? I couldn't remember Jones or Elliott. Yeah. So it's always good to have a first-time winner in the series. See somebody break through. And generally, once somebody breaks through, we see them, win multiple times. We're still waiting for that with Erik Jones, but with Chase Elliott, we've seen him, win a second time and really run well. So if you had to say who's going to be the next breakthrough guy, we've got a lot of really good young guys out there. Who would you be looking at?
I'd be looking at either William Byron or Daniel Suarez, depending on the weekend.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment there, Seth.
Yeah, I think Suarez is a little overdue, if you ask me.
Yeah, they both showed strength this year at times.
Yep.
To be fair, Stewart-Haas Racing has just been behind this year. That being said, between the two of them, like I said, it depends on the weekend. William Byron definitely at the 1.5 mile tracks and Daytona this weekend. Suarez, I'd almost say the short tracks, maybe Watkins Glen later on this month, just because Stewart-Haas Racing has been so consistent, at least in Ford in general, on the short tracks this year.
All right, we'll just have to see how that plays out. So now, Seth, your numerology thing, I saw you put it up on social media, but I'll let you share it.
Well, Alex Bowman started 8th. He drives the 88, and he led 88 laps. It's not that often that the numbers align like that. Alex Bowman is also just a 193rd driver to win a Cup Series race. If you take into consideration there's been over 2,500 Cup races, that's pretty that's pretty mind-boggling, because that also tells you how many races combined Richard Petty, Dale Earnhardt Sr., David Pearson, Jeff Gordon, and others won, that there's only been 193 winners in Cup. In comparison, ARCA, which is 15 years younger than the Cup Series, give or take, and has run 1,000 races less, has 340-something winners.
So that Cup winner is an exclusive club.
Yes.
So welcome to the club, Alex Bowman. Good job, young man. So
it's the pinnacle of the sport. So you're gonna, when you compare it to compare that to ARCA, where you have a lot of guys come and go. There's a lot of turnover in the ARCA series as far as drivers go, and it's has been billed for the last 2 decades has been more or less of a feeder series, for kids to get some seat time and come up. So I would imagine that number has really grown in the last 20 years in that ARCA series.
Oh, yes, it has. So now, speaking of feeder series and junior series, we have some action from Trucks and Xfinity in Chicago. We could talk about a little bit. We saw our first disqualification in an Xfinity race, and that was Christopher Bell was demoted from third place to last place. So make note of that, Brock Beard. So Seth or Gray, you want to talk about the Truck and Xfinity races from Chicago?
I'll defer to Seth on those because I didn't get to see much of those two races.
Well, the Xfinity Series was a Cole Custer show. Just saying that he led 151 of the 200 laps. He beat out Cup star Joey Logano. Michael Annett, who almost played the strategy game perfectly, stayed out as long as he could in the last stage, hoping for a caution. Finally got it and trapped well over half the field a lap down. When that caution came out, he was one of 9 cars on the lead lap. Because of people taking the wave around, 14 ended up finishing on the lead lap, 15 if you count Christopher Bell. But he was able to parlay that into a third-place finish. You had Austin Cindric at the top 5. Noah Gragson also played the strategy game, was running outside the top 10, ended up walking away with a 6th-place finish. So it was a very interesting race. Christopher Bell, like you said, was disqualified. It's the first time in the Xfinity Series since 2005 that a driver was disqualified. In 2005, that was Johnny Sauter at the Spring Texas race. He had finished 14th, was disqualified then for an illegal carburetor. Christopher Bell, on the other hand, he was disqualified because the car was extremely low in the front on both sides and was a little too high in the right rear. Gray, Richard, would either of you be able to explain how that happens?
I mean, it wouldn't be a surprise to them. They probably know they were pretty close to the limit, and they probably did they probably went for it. I mean, it was, they're in the playoffs, so what have they got to lose in reality? That's the one problem I have with it is, as soon as you get in the playoffs, it's just an open book to these guys. They can throw whatever they like at it. And I know there's the playoff points that he'll lose.
And sometimes,
but the guy's good enough to lose a few playoff points and not lose too much sleep over it.
Yeah, and sometimes too, and I'm not taking up for him, not saying that this is what happened, but I have seen this before. They use clamps on the screw jacks sometimes on the fronts to kind of lock them down to keep them. Sure. Sometimes those clamps do come loose and those things do turn and back off, and sometimes that will make them come in too low, and that's quite by accident. But there again, the rule's the rule, and if you're too low, you're in violation of the rules. So it doesn't matter how it happened. It's you're going to get busted for it.
Richard, I'm glad you brought up the playoff points, and there's a reason why I want to say that this actually means more than people realize. Christopher Bell, prior to this penalty, was about a race, maybe a race and a half behind Tyler Reddick in the point standings. Mm-hmm. That might not seem like a lot, but if he's able to close that gap, or if he had been, and been able to take the lead prior to the regular season finale, the winner of the regular season is going to get 15 playoff points. Second place only gets 10. That's a pretty big gap. It also could alter the back end, the cutoff for the playoffs. The reason why I'm saying that, the cutoff right now between Brandon Jones and Ryan Sieg for 11th and 12th is only about 20 points. Yes, the top 12 get in there, but if somebody wins behind that, say Jeremy Clements, like how he did a few years ago at Road America, that could easily knock Bell's teammate Brandon Jones out of the playoffs.
So here's a question for you. So the guys that finished, when did Bell finish? 3rd, was it?
Yes. So
the guys that finished 4th, 5th, and 6th, did they get moved up, or did they?
They do get moved up.
Okay.
In addition, wherever Bell finished in the stages, everybody gets moved up.
Okay, I'm with you.
Michael Annett previously did not earn any stage points in the second stage. Now he finishes 10th at that stage and gains 1 additional point. So it has bigger consequences than people realize.
Yep.
We've yet to see a DQ in the Cup Series yet. We've seen one in the truck where the winner was stripped a couple of weeks ago, and now we've seen a DQ in the Xfinity Series where a third place finisher was stripped of his finish. So I mean, NASCAR stated at the beginning of the year that they were gonna enforce this, and so far they have. Waiting to see what happens in the if someone in the Cup Series is going to fall victim to that this year.
I predicted.
It seems to me like the Cup guys have been behaving, I guess, for lack of a better word, because we haven't seen the there used to be like all these guys would fail post-race inspection or post-qualifying inspection. It was every week. It was just a ridiculous amount of guys. But now we just really haven't heard that. I don't know if they're just either sticking to the rules a little better, or they've got the LIS figured out, or they just figured out how to not get caught.
We have seen
the LIS from what I've heard, but
we have seen some post-qualifying qualifying times disallowed because of failing tech.
Right.
Especially
post-race yet.
Yeah, especially back at Kansas. Matt Tifft, I will say, he failed post-qualifying tech this weekend for the fourth time this season.
Yeah, that's not a coincidence, is it?
No, that's not. Although
has he had his crew chief suspended yet, or?
No, they eject typically either the car chief or the lead engineer from the track. We also had the Truck Series in action as well before we move on. Brett Moffitt, who won via that driver getting disqualified at Iowa, actually, according to him, actually earned the win this weekend in an unsponsored truck. Both his truck and John Hunter Nemechek's number 23 GMS machines were completely blank. They did not have sponsorship this weekend. Moffitt, the defending champion last year, had sponsorship issues, and at one point they were questioning whether he was going to be able to run the full season.
That's kind of unusual. What do you think? Because GMS has emerged as one of the top teams in that in the Truck Series.
My understanding is that Maury Gallagher, the owner, every time he's had a Legion on the truck, it's his own company, one of his other own companies, and he's trying to advertise to other companies saying, hey, we have blank advertising space if you're interested in, instead of simply slapping on GMS Fabrication or ISM Connect or another one of his companies.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's a good way to get your name out there, get your unsponsored truck in Victory Lane and say, hey, this space for rent. So
essentially what he's doing, he's running those trucks out of his own pocket.
He has been for almost 3 years now, and people haven't realized it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we see the same kind of thing over in Indy cars. Believe it or not, like on the Ray Hall team, when you see MyJack on the car, that MyJack is a company owned by Michael Lanigan, who's the partner in Ray Hall, Letterman Lanigan, and of course Roger Penske has had his own companies on the cars as well, with Penske Leasing and whatnot, and of course whenever you see Sonny's Barbecue on the Dale Coyne car. You should know Dale Coyne owns a franchise of Sonny's Barbecue restaurants. So it's not totally unusual to when you're paying out of your pocket, put your own brand name on there.
And something else I also want to mention in the Truck Series, Thorsport Racing had a horrific weekend. They changed engines on Matt Crafton's truck twice and still had engine issues during the race, that it was over revving under caution. Johnny Sauter was having transmission issues with the engine throughout the race and was relegated to an 18th place finish 3 laps down. Ben Rhodes blew his engine on the start. Mm-hmm. Granted, they're all using the NT1 Ilmore spec engine, but is that something that maybe the team is doing, either with the oil cooling or something like that? Because Ben Rhodes, during qualifying, the machine that they use to cool the engine and cycle the oil malfunctioned and dumped too much oil into the engine. So is that something that could have at least affected his truck, or maybe the other trucks if it's a company-wide issue?
Well, typically the people who build the engines will supply a tuner to go to the track and oversee the engine at the racetrack. Now, those engines are installed at the shop prior to the race by the crews, and of course I'm sure they work with the engine supplier to have everything to spec that they require in it. But yeah, sometimes it's human error that can happen. And like I said, I don't know what the total diagnosis was with Ben Rhodes' problem. I watched some of that and when he went to pit road with that, but I never did hear the full verdict on it. What actually was the problem? But it is unusual to have a team have issues like that, and then I'm sure they'll go back and study it and see what happened.
Now, another team I do want to briefly mention and bring up, David Gilliland Racing with the Crosley Group. That team, for the first time, had 4 trucks on track. They all finished inside the top 14. Might have been a little bit better had Tyler Ankrum not sped on pit road, and might have been a little bit better had Natalie Decker not gotten turned by Todd Gilliland earlier in stage 3. That being said, it seems like they're starting to turn it around along with Kyle Busch Motorsports, because Toyota this year with 9 trucks compared to 6 trucks last year on a full-time basis, or at least a semi-full-time basis, have had about 8 fewer top 5s and about 12 to 15 fewer top 10s this year compared to last year with fewer trucks.
Well, guys, we got about 4 minutes left in the show, but let's preview next week, because we are off to Daytona, correct? Correct. So this is always a fun one. I always like the July Daytona race. Going all the way back to when it was the Firecracker 400. But it's always an entertaining race, and it's always been really good since they've made it a night race. So what are we looking to see now? We're on the first year with the new restrictor plate package and whatnot. We saw it perform well earlier in the season.
There's no plates.
That's what I mean. The new non-restrictor plate package. Excuse me. The new Super Speedway package. So, and we saw it at Talladega earlier in the season, and I thought it put on a pretty good show. So, what do you think we're going to see at Daytona then?
It's going to be interesting, mainly because, and I'm sorry if I cut you off, Gray. It's going to be interesting, mainly because Daytona is about a lane, if not a lane and a half more narrow than Talladega. You're also going to have it under lights, which is going to mean increased speeds as well. So it's going to be hectic. That's the best way I can put it.
And of course the Daytona race, the summer race at Daytona is always a good bit different, because the track is even though it is under the lights, the track is going to be hotter. It's going to be slicker, and handling is going to be more at a premium for this particular race than it is in the Daytona 500. So that always brings its own little element to the race. You'll see cars being a handful down there this time.
Yeah, and it's always a very fast race too. It seems to just go by like that. Boom, you take 100 miles off of it, and it's just like, wow.
Well, it's a sprint. It becomes a sprint race.
Exactly. Yeah. So let's talk about who we like for a winner, because I think NASCAR is the only series active. So we'll all go ahead and pick a winner for NASCAR. Richard, you want to start off here?
Oh, I've got 2 that are in my mind. I got Suarez and Menard, one of those 2 guys. Let's go with Suarez.
Okay. Gray, who do you like?
I'm going to have to stick in the Ford camp. Of course, I like. Let me see. I like Ryan Blaney.
Yep, Ryan Blaney, good pick. Yeah, he could use a win this year for sure. Now, Seth?
Well, while they're picking Fords, I'm going to look at Chevrolet mainly because of what they did at Talladega, ganging up on everybody else, and there's more Chevrolets in the field than there are Fords or Toyotas. So I'm going to go with William Byron.
Okay, all right. That's so. We'll get another two first time winners back to back. Do you know the last time that's happened?
Not off the top of my head.
Me
come on.
me either. So, all right. So that leaves a pick for me. You know, I was leaning towards picking one of the Penske guys, but actually, now that you mention it, Richard, Paul Menard's actually not a bad pick. The guy's really good at the restricted plate races, and he, we haven't seen Paul in victory lane in a while. I think Brickyard several years ago. But yeah, I kind of like Paul Menard for this one, so I'm going to go with that. So
yeah, that would be the Wood Brothers' 100th win if he's able to pull it off.
Oh, they've been stuck in 99 for a while, huh?
Yeah, they have since Blaney won at Pocono year before last.
Gosh, boy, I'd like to see that. 'Cause I really enjoy the Wood Brothers. So, but guys, with that being said, we are out of time. So I want to thank you, Seth and Greg and Richard. I want to thank Hoobazoo Radio Network and iHeartRadio and Spreaker. I want to thank you folks that tune in and listen to us here at Drafting the Circuits. Till next week, good night.
WHOOBAZOO, that's Hoobazoo.com.
Enter website, enter website, enter website, enter website.